Welcome back in Live Now. I'm Austin Westfall. Take a look. Let's talk about the Russia-Ukraine war. Russia and Ukraine exchanged hundreds more prisoners Saturday as part of a major swap that amounted to a rare moment of cooperation in otherwise failed efforts to reach a ceasefire. The exchange came hours after Kyiv came under a large-scale Russian drone and missile attack that left at least 15 people injured. Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, and Russia's defense ministry said that each side brought home 307 more soldiers on Saturday. And this is a day after each side released a total of 390 combatants and civilians. Further releases are expected over the weekend. They're set to make the swap, the largest in more than 3 years of war. Hal Kempfer is still here. Hal, I originally planned to have you on to discuss some of the activity that we've seen in Ukraine's capital as of late, but I thought it was interesting that we still saw the exchange of people from both sides after the attack on Kyiv yesterday. Did you also find that fascinating?
I did find it fascinating, Austin, particularly because what we're seeing is these continued missile and drone bombardments of Kyiv. They've been going on a pretty regular basis, and they have been big as at any time during the war. Of course, the Ukrainian capability to intercept a lot of these missiles, especially intercepting drones, is also very substantial. So sometimes you don't see the damage or death, if you will. In this case, 15 people were hurt. You don't see the same casualties that you would see earlier on with some of those, but don't think that it wasn't due to the Russians' lack of trying. They were trying to inflict these massive blows. But with all of that said, you see another level. And we've seen this throughout the war where they do these prisoner exchanges. Now, this is the biggest one yet. And this one actually came out of that non-event, if you will, between that non-meeting between President Zelenskyy and Putin in Turkey, where basically Putin said, hey, meet me in Turkey for this summit just between the two of us. And President Trump said, yes, go do this. And then later said, I will even fly to Turkey to help you and meet you. And if Putin comes down for this, and Secretary Rubio was actually in Turkey while this was going on. And Putin was not only a no-show, he didn't even send his foreign minister. He sent a lower-level delegation, which met with a Ukrainian delegation. And out of that, there was a lot of, fairly polite, although very direct discourse. But the thing of substance that came out of this was this: each side is exchanging 1,000 POWs. Now, some of these POWs, I should mention, based on what I saw, it sounded like there might have been some detained civilians that were in that mix. Not a large amount, but some of them may have not been technically POWs under international law. They could have actually been civilians that were taken prisoner and were being held. They're called detained civilians under the Geneva Convention, but they were being held, and they were also sent back. And that could have been a little bit on both sides, but all I saw was the Russians were releasing some of these civilians along with all the military prisoners of war.
So one thing, and you've already alluded to this, there was a time not too long ago where we were actually wondering if Zelenskyy and Putin would meet face to face. For a moment there, it looked like it was very possible. Of course, it didn't end up happening. Has there been any indication that we might get back on that track eventually?
Well, they both talked about it. They both indicated that they have to have face-to-face negotiations. Certainly President Trump has talked about the importance of both sides talking to each other directly. I'm not holding my breath. Part of it is the venue. And I think part of it is that Putin is afraid on a very personal level. He's very conscious of his security, and he's very careful where he travels. He goes a few places, but he doesn't travel a lot of places. And there's a good reason why he doesn't travel to a lot of places. He's concerned about that. So the question would be venue. Where would they go? At that point, Zelenskyy has to have the same question. I mean, I can imagine the Russians throwing out say, hey, let's meet in Minsk. Well, I don't think President Zelenskyy would be at all interested in meeting anyone in Minsk, in Belarus. So that would be a question of how they would do that. Turkey obviously has opened the door and said they'd be willing to host them. I think the Vatican has kind of opened the door, although that does raise a few questions with the ICC warrant that's out for Putin right now. How would he get to the Vatican? Because he's got to travel through Italy. But anyway, there's just a lot of questions on how they might do it. The Turkey thing last weekend looked like or last, I should say last, the week before last, looked like a very promising thing if they could have, if Putin would have come down for it. But for whatever reason, he didn't want to. And I can only guess there may have been security reasons why he didn't. He may have picked, his his intelligence service, security services could have picked up on something, and they just said, wave off. We can't control this thing well enough. We can't guarantee what's going to happen there. There could have been a lot of reasons why, or it could have been, which I really think it is, Putin's stuck. Yeah, there's really the biggest thing that hinders a direct negotiation is, what does he negotiate? He's got almost half of his economy tied up with the military and the war. He has no prospect of turning that around in any short order. So if the war ends, he's in a political economic dilemma of significant, huge proportions for him personally. And then of course the Russian people are saying, if they don't get what they want, they would probably turn around and say, why did we make this big sacrifice? Why did we lose 1 million men in this war to get something far below what you claim the war was for? So he's got a lot of political reasons why he does not want to really negotiate, certainly right now.
I don't need all the tricks of the trade, but I got to ask you this before we go, because you piqued my curiosity. What all does it take to get a Zelenskyy or a Putin to travel somewhere? What security measures need to be brought along with them to ensure their safety?
Well, they have a personal security detail, which is fairly extensive for each of these leaders because there is a considerable threat. With President Zelenskyy, believe me, part of the problem they'd have is that the Russians want to kill Zelenskyy, period. All right. And they've made multiple attempts to try and assassinate him. And there's nothing to indicate that if Zelenskyy met Putin anywhere outside of Ukraine, that they wouldn't try to kill him, try to assassinate him there. So that's a big challenge. It puts a lot of onus on the host nation to ensure the security, to make sure that President Zelenskyy doesn't get killed in their country. Same thing with Putin. He's concerned that the Ukrainians might try to kill him. Now, there's probably a little bit more international pressure and constraints on Ukrainian conduct in that regard. Although there have been plenty of attempts, some of them pretty darn close, on at least reportedly on Putin since the war began. So he's got a lot of reasons to be concerned about his personal safety. And then, hey, remember, you got to look at aircraft too. I mean, the idea of taking an aircraft out of the sky to kill somebody, that's not some remote thing for Putin. That's something that's like things I did last year list. And so he's got to look at things like that. And even though he's been trying to very concertedly eliminate any competition, any threat to his regime or to him personally, politically speaking, usually involving very senior figures falling out of windows on high levels of buildings. Even though he's been doing all of that, there are still those out there who would like to see him go, who would like to see him replaced either with themselves or somebody else that they have more control over. And so he recognizes that when he leaves the country, like any autocratic leader, when they leave the country, they also leave a lot of those levers that keep them in power. And so, it wouldn't be the first time somebody left the country, and while they were gone, the country through a coup or through something happened, and they're not really welcome when they come back. And so he's got to be concerned about that as well.
You've been generous with your time as always on these Saturdays, Hal. I got to ask you, what's coming up on the Strat podcast?
Well, I've actually recorded the Strat podcast. It's coming out tonight. And of course, if anyone is on Apple Podcasts, Captivate, or pretty much anywhere you get Strat podcasts, it'll be out there. I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about terrorism, violent extremism, some of the things that were done in the past very effectively to identify emerging threats. Some of those programs out there, I'm going to spend a lot. And I'm going to talk about Washington, D.C., what happened with the 2 Israeli diplomats that were killed. I'm going to compare that with Palm Springs and some other terrorist events with that as well. And then I'm going to move a little bit more international and talk about some of the things that we just talked about, for example, with Ukraine and Russia. And it's going to be it's a fairly lengthy podcast. So I hope, by the way, you can also go to strappodcast.com and get it there as well.
Hey, we always Appreciate you on these Saturdays. Anybody who wants to go listen to it, feel free not only to listen to the new episodes, but also some of the old episodes with yours truly, Andrew Kraft,
I think there
as well.
might be one. Yeah, we had a rather eminent guest or two on those. So, yeah, I think that'd be a good one to listen to.
Have a good rest of your weekend.
All right. You too, Austin.
So let's button this up because President Zelenskyy did post on X earlier today. He posted it's about 4 minutes long. He speaks in Ukrainian, but it's got the English subtitles at the bottom. I want to make sure we play his statement out. He talks not only about the POW exchange, but also about recent attacks in the Ukrainian capital.
Дорогі українці, українки, головне – обмін. Ми сьогодні продовжили. Додому повернули ще 307 наших воїнів, рядові сержанти. Більшість – Збройні сили України. Є також Нацгвардія, є також Державна прикордонна служба. З усіх цих людей 273 потрапили в полон в Донецькій області. Значна частина ще у 22-му році. Також з території Херсонської, Запорізької, Харківської областей, Луганщина. Загалом за 2 дні обмінів вже вдома 697 українців. Завтра 3-й етап. Ми маємо звільнити цими днями 1000 наших людей, але завдання звільнити абсолютно всіх, хто зараз утримується в Росії. І це завдання спільне для наших розвідок, для наших дипломатів, для всієї нашої держави. Зрозуміло, що це завдання непросте, але треба реалізувати. Я вдячний всім у світі, хто нам допомагає. І це для нас справді дуже важливо, щоб наші партнери, кожен лідер, кожна держава підтримували нас в цій складній роботі. Жодного дня не зупиняємось. І, звісно, я хочу подякувати сьогодні всім нашим підрозділам на передовій, а також нашим правоохоронцям, всім, хто поповнює обмінний фонд для України. Наші активні дії – це завжди, в тому числі дії заради такої можливості обмінювати наших з полону. Сьогодні ж є за що відзначити наші українські підрозділи захисників неба. Був дійсно масштабний та підлий російський удар. Балістика, частину ракет вдалося збити. Було також 250 дронів, більшість шахедів. Щоночі наші сили працюють для захисту життів. Я хочу подякувати всім, хто допомагає Україні з протиповітряною обороною, з постачанням систем ППО для нас. І це дійсно реальний захист людей тут і зараз. Протягом дня тривали роботи в Києві після російського удару. На жаль, люди постраждали, були пошкоджені будинки, торговельний центр. Росія кожен день наповнює горем та вбивствами просто затягує війну. Вчора жорстокий удар по Одещині, щодня по Сумщині, по Харківщині, іншим нашим регіонам. На все це потрібна реакція, жорстка реакція Сполучених Штатів Америки, реакція Європи, реакція всіх світів, хто хоче завершення війни. Путін відмовився від припинення вогню вже неодноразово. Це нічого йому не дає, крім того, що кожного дня він забирає життя. Кожен день дає приводи для нових санкцій проти Росії. Кожен день доводить, що без тиску на Росію війна триватиме. Україна готова до будь-якої форми дипломатії, яка дасть результат. Ми готові до всіх кроків, які зможуть гарантувати реальну безпеку. Саме Росія ні до чого не готова. Наступний тиждень має бути часом активності заради нового тиску на Росію, тобто заради миру. Дякую всім в світі, хто з нами, з Україною, з українцями. Слава Україні!
President Zelenskyy posting that earlier on X. Live look at the White House. as we transition to our final break of the hour, 7:50 in the nation's capital, 4:50 out west. We'll be right back.